Congresswoman Debbie Lesko, proudly representing Arizona's 8th Congressional District. Representative Lesko, welcome back. How are you?
I am doing fantastic. How are you doing, Seth?
Doing just fine. Debbie, if I might, the congressional districts are have been changed. You currently represent District 8. When November comes around, people will see your name under a different district number, correct?
I actually lucked out. I'm still in District 8.
Oh, they're keeping you in 8. Okay.
I'm currently in 8, and I'm still going to be in 8.
I like it. That testifies to how strongly you stand on your positions, and good for you, Debbie Lesko.
There we go.
I wanted to talk to you about a bunch of legislation you've co-sponsored regarding protecting our children. I'm so glad you've been doing it, but I just can't not ask you about something you've been tweeting about, which has to do with President Biden's new budget proposal, the cuts to border enforcement, the zero mentions of border security. Could you say something about this? Because the crisis has not gone away. The media doesn't cover it, but it's not gone away. Would you just say something about that before I get into some of this other legislation you've been working on?
Yeah, Biden is just a total disaster for our country. I mean, as you know, in Phoenix metropolitan area, we have the highest inflation rate in the entire country, right? And what this guy and the Democrats want to do is spend more. They're like, oh, that'll solve it. Let's spend more of your taxpayer dollars. And the most shocking thing that I think about Biden's proposed budget is that in 10 years from now, we will be paying, if his budget goes into effect, we will be paying $1.1 trillion per year in interest payments on our national debt. Now, to put that in perspective, $1.1 trillion a year is more than we spend on Medicare in a year.
Wow.
It's 11 times more than what we spend on our veterans for health care. And it's more than the entire budget for the Department of Defense.
It's incredible.
I mean, this is scary, and it's a national security risk. It's not only burdening our children, our grandchildren, and each one of us with the amount of taxes we're going to have to pay, the amount of debt, the amount of interest. It is just unsustainable, and it will affect our national security.
Yeah, I have no doubt about that, and I wonder if you have found in your in Washington D.C. in the House of Representatives, Debbie, there's a congressman in Texas who gets a little attention now and again. Democrats, have you found Democrats that are on board with where we are on this, or is it almost exclusively, with an exception of one or two, almost exclusively a Republican concern?
You know, I don't know. I haven't polled them on the issue. I mean, I guess we'll find out when the bills go through. I don't underestimate Nancy Pelosi.
Right.
Nancy Pelosi has a very strong arm, I guess you'd call it, and she gets her people in shape, and they all seem to vote in a block, even if it hurts them politically. And even on our committees, like I'm on the Energy and Commerce Committee. Now, historically, when Republicans were in the majority, we actually had a lot of bipartisan legislation. We worked together because there's a lot of big issues. Instead of just energy and commerce, it's healthcare, technology, telecommunications. It's the broadest jurisdiction of any other committee in Congress. Well, we've been told that Pelosi is running the show, the chairman of the committee who has waited years to become the chairman of this committee can't even do what he wants.
Yeah.
You know, she's the one that says, this is what bills that you're going to hear, and this is what you're going to do. And so I've heard that from Democrats on all of the committees.
Yeah.
You know, it's like she's running the show.
I've heard that too. I have, and you know, depending on what your views are, you know, you have to hand it to her for being, I suppose, an effective doer of that. It may not be the job of Speaker of House, but she's effective at whipping her caucus. Yeah.
Yeah, and I never underestimate her, and I don't underestimate them. They're going to put a whole bunch of bills up that are going to make, that are going to be votes that Republicans, they'll mix some good stuff in with some really bad stuff, and then they'll attack the Republicans for voting no on it, and this is what they'll do. One of the things that they'll do is so that they don't lose so many seats.
Do you get the sense, by the way, that what you said of Nancy Pelosi's control of the House is somewhat analogous also to Washington, D.C. generally? I mean, it usually is that 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue is the center of power. It kind of seems to me on the policy issues coming out of 1600 Pennsylvania and what seems to be pushed seems to be coming from the Speaker's house, too. It seems like she's kind of running the show in D.C. right now. I don't know if that's just my perspective or if you see that as well.
Well, there's definitely, I can't remember what it was. It was recently where President Biden, I think it was the ban on importing oil from Russia, right?
Yeah.
He didn't want to vote. He didn't want to vote on that.
Right.
He just wanted to do an executive order so that he had more flexibility. But Pelosi pushed back, and she said, "No, we're going to have a vote on this."
Yeah.
And so she has a lot of power. She's been around a long time, and she's politically savvy. I give her that.
Yeah, I do too. So are you, though, Debbie, and you have turned some of your energies to things that we talk about here all the time: parental rights, children's rights, protection of children. You've got a lot of pieces of legislation doing that, from the Protecting Parental Rights Act to the Hunter Act. Talk to us a little bit about something we were talking about in the first hour of this show, the Protecting Children from Experimentation Act. This sounds hugely relevant. You want to say a word about that?
Oh my goodness. I talked to, there was a man that came to Washington, D.C., and when he was a teenager, he was somehow convinced that he was a woman, right? And so he went through the whole sex change and everything, and then he said it really messed him up, and that he was suicidal and all kinds of things. So now he's back to being a man, but it was really an interesting story from someone that has been through this, and what Republicans and myself are trying to protect young people, minors, okay? Because in some of these states, they actually charge parents with child abuse and take their kids away from them if the minor says, "I want a sex change," or "I want hormone therapy," against the parent's will. The state will come in and say, that's child abuse, and we're going to take the kid away from you. This is scary stuff. Yep. Because I don't know about you, but when I was a teenager, things that you thought you weren't thinking right. You know what I mean? You didn't know everything.
You didn't know anything.
Right.
Not you, me. Sorry, not you, Debbie. Right. Well, right. Teenagers know nothing.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
Right. And so to let a teenager who's confused to begin with decide on their own against their parents' will to say, you know what, I want to have my breast removed.
Right.
I want to have sex change therapy.
Yep.
Or all these things against the parents' will. That's just wrong.
Yep.
And in another related subject, I really applaud the governor of Florida and the Florida legislature for passing that legislation that bans this sexual identity education for kindergarten through third graders. What kind of people, and I'm sorry, but what agenda does the Democrats have when all the world's going to heck in a handbasket, and their priority is making sure that 5 to 8-year-olds are taught about gender identity in school? There's something wrong with that. That's just morally wrong.
I call it perversion. It's an interesting thing, Debbie, the fascination with this on the left, the energy on it. It's fascinating. On the one hand, they tell us it's not happening, but then if we try and stop it, oh my gosh, we have brought down the rainforests, the rooftops off the rainforests. There is an assault on the family in this country. There's an assault on parental rights. There's an assault on childhood, and it's not pretty. And I just got to say, hats off to you. for standing in the way of it.
You
I
bet.
really appreciate you doing it, Debbie, very much.
Well, I'm glad to do it. We have to stand together on that.
You bet, and we will. And we'll talk about some of those other pieces of legislation, too, in the near future. It's good to catch up with you. Godspeed. I'm glad you're keeping District 8. You don't have to change your mailing address. I love it. Debbie Lesko, Godspeed to you. We'll visit again very soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm Seth Leibsohn.